Hello and welcome to another edition of the Leader Campus Talks. I'm Mel Wildermuth, and with me is Jason Jennings, best-selling author on business and leadership, and also mentioned as, I think you're number 11, it says here, on the Global Gurus Top 30. And it has in here that your book, a recent book, it's not the big that eats the small, it's the fast that eats the slow. Within weeks of its release, it hit the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and New York Times bestseller lists, and now published in 32 languages. The United States, USA Today, named it one of the top 25 books of the year. And it says here you're a dynamic speaker and new ideas that shape leadership perspectives in those who read his books and attend his talks. He is mostly known in the United States, but all around the world. Man, you have an impressive set of statistics. So
let me tell you something about the global gurus.
Okay.
Because I've never been really big on who's who or popularity contest. What I like about global gurus is there's about 20,000 meeting planners, CEOs, leaders in business around the world. Each year, what they do is they nominate who they think are should be on the list of the global gurus. And then, of course, you invite your followers to vote for you.
Oh.
So it sounds like a vanity contest so far, but here's what I like about it and why it has an air of real legitimacy. You can only vote once.
Oh.
So I like it that you can only vote once from an IP address. And so there's no way that anybody is going to stuff the ballot box or have somebody sitting there voting over and over and over again. So I think it does lend an air of legitimacy to it.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to have been on the list for, I guess, 5 or 6 years. It's that's pretty humbling.
Oh, wow. Well, I know that I will probably never make the list, I'm sorry to say. But I am working on a book, but we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you. The first question I have for you is the book. It's not the big that eats the small. It's this fast that eats the slow. What made you think of that concept?
You want the straight scoop?
Yes, straight scoop is fine.
Because I'm pretty transparent.
All right.
So it's not the big that eat the small; it's the fast that eat the slow.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, it was my first book, and there now have been 8 of them. I'm generally good for a book about every 2 years, and I was desperately trying to get a contract for my first book. And one day, and I'd been turned down by many, many publishers. Getting your first book published is always one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But with every turn down, every rejection, I became more and more determined that I would get a contract with a big publisher. And so finally, one day I got an email from a man by the name of Adrian Zackheim. He was at HarperCollins at the time. It's the only book I've done all of my books with him, but it's the only book we did together at HarperCollins before moving to Penguin Putnam. And I got an email that said, Mr. Jennings, I'm not interested in you. I'm not interested in your proposal. I'm not interested in your manuscript. I'm not interested in your constituency. Please don't bother me again. Well, at this point in time, what have you got to lose? So I hit reply. And I wrote a very nasty note. And I essentially said, I think you're a jackass.
Ooh.
And I did. And I said, and your little publishing company, HarperCollins, is owned by Rupert Murdoch. And the next time I'm with him, I'll let him know what a jackass he's got running HarperCollins. I hit send. You have nothing to lose. 2 minutes later, I get an email back from him. And he says, Mr. Jennings, you certainly have chutzpah. If you're ever in New York, I'll give you 10 minutes. I hit reply and I said, I will be in your office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I flew a red eye across the country and walked into his office, and I went to shake his hand. And he's a tough New Yorker and doesn't shake hands. And I said, oh, you don't shake? I said, I'm from California. We don't shake either. We hug. And I walked up and I wrapped my arms around him in the biggest, tightest embrace he's ever had. The man almost died. Today, 8 books later with him, and I love him. He's the best business publisher in the industry. Every time I walk into his office, I say, stand up. It's hug time. And the guy, no. So sat in his office, and he said, I don't like your idea. He said, let me tell you what I'm looking for. He said, I'm looking for a book on speed. And he said, can you do that? And I said, well, let me go back to the hotel and think about it. And I said, let's get together again tomorrow morning. And so I was in New York, and I had my research director, Lawrence Houghton, with me. And we put our heads together, and we came up with this title. It's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. Walked in the next day to Adrian Zackheim's office, and he said, I love the title. He said, how would you do the book? And I said, well, I don't know anything about speed. I mean, I'd like to think I'm fast, but what we would do, and what I've done with every one of my books, is we come up with a topic, whether it's speed, whether it's innovation, whether it's growth, whether it's leadership. We figure out how to quantify it. I then assemble a research team, and we will study 40, 50, 60, 70,000 companies to find out who does it better or does it the best. And so we came up with 10 companies that we believed, and the criteria that we determined were the fastest thinking, fastest acting companies in the world. And he bought the book, and the book came out, and there's a great story. It might have been my only book. There's a distinct possibility. Most authors have this highly romanticized view of how books happen. They think your book is published, it's automatically in every bookstore, and you're going to sell lots of copies. The reality is most books sell about 4,000 or 5,000 copies from a first-time author. And that could have very well happened to me. About 2 weeks before the book was going to go on sale, I got a call from a man by the name of Craig Kitchen. And Craig Kitchen was then the CEO of the Premier Radio Networks. And at the time, Premier Radio Networks had, they had Rush Limbaugh, they had Dr. Laura, they had the Jim Rome Sports Show. They syndicated about 100 radio shows across the country. And Craig said, when's your book coming out? And I said, in a couple of weeks. And he said, do you remember last summer? He said, you came out to Colorado Springs and you spent a day with myself and my executive team and helped us put things in perspective. And I said, yeah, it was a great time. And he said, you remember I didn't pay you? I said, well, you're my friend. I wasn't looking for payment. He said, well, I just didn't have any money in the budget to pay your fees. He said, but it's payback time. He said, put together a radio commercial for the book, send it down. I'm going to give you $1 million worth of free advertising.
Good Lord.
Good Lord is right. I happened to be in Nebraska the day the book went on sale and the day the radio campaign began. And in one day, the book became the number one best-selling book in America. Not the number one business book, but the number one best-selling book in America. And it was just unbelievable. Well, of course, earning New York Times status and USA Today status and Wall Street Journal status for your first book, that's what gives you the right to write your second book, and that's what gives you the right to write your third book. And you only earn the right to continue writing books as long as they're successful. So I'm very fortunate. Out of 8 books, 7 have been big bestsellers. I remember writing one book. Probably my best book ever was called Hit the Ground Running. And it came out at the end of 2008, just as the economy in the United States was tanking, and nobody wanted to hit the ground running. All they wanted to do was hit the bed and pull the covers over them until the Great Recession ended. But other than that book, I've been very lucky and very fortunate. But that's the true story of where the title came from, and that's the accurate depiction of events of how that first book took off and really made my career. And that's what's allowed me to speak 60 to 80 times a year around the world. I've done 1,200 keynote speeches. And it's all grueling, hard work to do, to research and write a book, have a new one every 2 years, make sure that they get on the bestseller lists, and just have to keep driving.
Going to drive yourself into an early grave, I think.
No. I'm in the gym 6 days a week. I sleep 8 hours a night. I get on an airplane wherever I'm going. I'm asleep before the airplane takes off, and the flight attendant has to gently touch me and say, Mr. Jennings, we're about to land in 2 minutes, and I've never taken a sleeping tablet in my life. No. I take care of myself. I listen, the rigors of what I do are great, but you have to learn how to really take care of yourself if you're going to maintain that kind of a schedule.
There was a person I've interviewed also that should be coming up pretty soon on the net or on Leader Campus. His name is Marcel Daney. Dene. That's it, Marcel Dene. And he looks at neuroscience, and he has a master's degree in that, and then he has a bachelor's degree in fitness and in in your eating habits or whatever.
Yes, nutrition.
Nutrition. Thank you. And so that's what he was talking about is the merger of this neuroscience with fitness. And he wrote a book that he had, and for the life of me, I can't think of the book. I'm sorry to say. He'll probably get mad at me. He's in Singapore, and so what's your vision on that? Obviously, if you're in the gym 6 days a week and you're getting your 8 hours sleep, you obviously think also that your nutrition and your health have a bearing upon how you carry your leadership status.
Recently, a speaking agent who books me with some degree of regularity said, if you ever utter the words on the stage again that you're still at your high school graduation weight, he said, I'm going to kill you. And he said, because nobody in the audience can identify with you. And it is just, for me, early on, I made a conscious decision that I was going to eat very, very carefully, drink very limited amounts, not do dinners. I'll give you another little funny one. I guess I'm kind of a quirky guy. I've never done a business dinner in my life. I always tell people I will meet you for breakfast, I will meet you for lunch, but tomorrow I've got to be on stage. I've got to deliver the goods, and I'm going to be remembered a lot longer for how I deliver on stage than whether or not I'm a convivial dinner companion, knocking down 2 or 3 drinks and eating fatty food. And so, no, I think the rigors, I mean, if you want to play the game, I mean, if you want to do 60 to 80 events a year around the world, if you want to travel several 100,000 miles a year, if my purpose is I love helping people achieve their highly principled people achieve their full potential. That's why I write my books. And I want to do that for a long, long time. And so I have all of these disciplines in my life, and some people on the outside look at me and they say, well, he's just kind of idiosyncratic, or he's a little quirky or something. But that's fine. That's fine.
You mentioned your other book, Hitting the Ground Running, and high speed industries creating change in a nanosecond culture.
Yes.
How do leaders do that? How do they speed up their approach to running corporations in the future?
Well, I guess let me address that, but let me set it up with my body of work.
Sure.
I don't have a muse that sits on my shoulder that gives me my titles or my ideas. My ideas come from interviewing 1,000 people a year, 1,000 CEOs, business leaders, business owners, in preparation for speeches. For every speech I do, I spend an hour and a half with the CEO on the phone, and I conduct 10 to 12 other interviews. And one of the questions that I ask is, what's keeping you awake at night these days about your business? And so that's where the ideas come from. But then I'm the first one to admit I don't have all the answers. So then what we do is, when we come up with a topic, whether the topic is innovation or speed, which I'm going to get to in just a moment, myself and my research teams, who are second career MBA students, get together and we ask the question, how are we going to quantify this? What would determine whether somebody is a high speed company, or what would decide if somebody matched this? And we come up with all the criteria. Then we use our own research. We use a company called Research on Demand. We use another company called FactSet. And we will basically screen and study, as I said, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100,000 companies. So in total, we have screened and studied more than 220,000 companies for my 8 books during the past 17 years. And so any response that I give you is not going to come from the position of what I think, because as I tell people, what I think is not that important. It's no more important than what anybody else thinks. But where it's going to come from is pure research. So your question was, how does a company become faster? How does a company do business in a nanosecond culture? Based on our research, they do not do tactical things. Companies that do tactical things and scurry from one tactic to another generally end up stepping all over themselves. So it comes down to a few strategic things. And I'll list as many as you want, but I'll begin by listing 3.
Okay.
The first one is this: high-speed companies, great companies, have a purpose built around doing well by doing good. They do not have a vision statement. They do not have a mission statement. Today, when people, the millennials and Generation Z, hear the words vision and mission, their eyes roll back in their head and they go, oh, here we go again. I mean, another vision. Fast companies don't have visions. What they have is they have a purpose built around doing well by doing good. So I think of Ingvar Kamprad at IKEA, who has built the world's only global furniture brand and has earned the ranks of 10 wealthiest men in the world with a fortune estimated in excess of 45 to $50 billion. And if you talk to Ingvar Kamprad or anybody at IKEA, they don't think they're in the furniture business. They think that furniture is just a vehicle for doing what they do. They exist for one reason: to improve the lives of the many. So their purpose has nothing to do with furniture. They exist to improve the lives of the many. I think of another company, Henry Schein, based in New York, a decidedly unglamorous business. They're in the distribution business. They distribute medical supplies to doctors' offices, dental offices, and veterinarian practices in 100 countries around the world. They're about an $11.5 to $12 billion company. And what stuck out in my mind about them is they have the highest recorded employee engagement scores of any company as ever measured by an outside research company. And they have millennials lined up around the block to work with them. And we've been told the millennials are supposed to be so quirky. Well, why are these millennials lined up? Well, when you talk to their CEO, he will tell you the story of how he grew up in South Africa and how white people, he believes, were very, very good at hiding the horrors of apartheid. But his father was a doctor, and he wanted his children to witness firsthand just how horrible apartheid was. And Stan Bergman says that at the age of 7 or 8, he decided to commit the rest of his life to ending social injustice. And so here's Henry Schein, this $11.5 or $12 billion company in 100 countries around the world. Their purpose is not to be the best distributor of medical supplies in the world. It's not about engaging customers. Mm-hmm. It is to end social injustice. So what does that mean practically? So as he told me, there's 8 million kids in the United States who had never seen a dentist because there's no money. He said, that's an injustice. He said, how hard could it be for us to go to our dental suppliers and say, make up a few million dental packs for free? How hard could it be for us to go to our dentists and say, we know you work very hard, but give us a free Saturday and Sunday? How hard could it be for us to come up with a few $1 million in seed money to rent some stadiums and found a program called Smiles for Kids, which has now seen more than 6 million kids? And he said, we exist to end social injustice. And if you want to engage millennials and Generation Z, you've got to give them a purpose much bigger than just making money. And so, number one, fast companies share a purpose, and it is palpable. They live it, they celebrate it, they talk about it. Everybody is truly shooting at the same target. That's number one. Number two, very quickly, fast companies let go. They perfect the art of letting go. What do they let go of? They've become very, very good, based on our research, at letting go of several things. First of all, yesterday's breadwinners. They acknowledge that what brought you to where you are is not going to get you to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And so they're very quick to offload yesterday breadwinners. They're very good at letting go of ego. What is ego? Ego is when the boss has got to be the smartest person in the room. Because if the boss has to be the smartest person in the room, eventually by the time information comes to the boss, all the rough edges are going to have been honed off, and the boss will be presented with what people think the boss wants to hear. Mm-hmm. You've got to get rid of you have to let go of same old. I talk a lot. I always ask audience, I say, finish this statement for me. If it ain't broke and the audience shouts, don't fix it. And I say, you know what's wrong with that in business? It flies in the face of the law of suckage. Now, what's the law of suckage? The law of suckage is this. By the time you figure out you suck, you have sucked for a long time. And it's probably going to take a long time to fix it. And the fourth thing fast companies do is they let go of conventional wisdom. I've never met a company that wants to achieve conventional results. They all want to achieve unconventional results. But then what do? They embrace conventional wisdom. Well, it's basic mathematics. If all you embrace is conventional wisdom, the most you can ever hope to achieve are conventional results, and that's if the wind is at your back and the stars are in perfect alignment. So, number one, purpose. They share a purpose. Number two, they build letting go into their DNA. And number three, and I could go on and on. I've got a number 4, but I'm going to give you the 3 I was going to give you, okay. And that is this, because this bucks conventional wisdom. Fast companies understand they exist for one reason, and that is to grow. Now, I remember sitting with Mike Long, the CEO of Arrow Electronics. He presides over a company with 19,000 people around the world, $25 billion in annual revenues. And all he ever talks about is growth, 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 growth. We have to grow. We have to grow. And one day I looked at him and I said, Mike, are your shareholders so greedy? I mean, that they push this growth thing. And he looked at me like I just fell off the back of a turnip truck. And he said, we don't grow for the benefit of our shareholders. And I said, excuse me? He said, no. He said, we make our shareholders number one by actually making them number three. And I said, well, so what's this growth thing? He said, Jason, he said, I have 18,000 people who work here. Here's what I can tell you. Every one of them wants to make more money. And every one of them worth keeping is going to want a promotion. He said, guess what? If there's no growth, there's no more money to go around, and there's no promotions unless somebody dies or gets thrown under a bus. He said, listen to these remarkable words of Mike Long. He said, as the CEO, chairman, and president of this company, if anybody ever leaves Arrow because they feel they have to leave Arrow to improve themselves or improve their financial circumstances, he said, I should be fired from all of my duties. He said, look, he said, what we do is we grow for the benefit of our people. And he said, when you grow for the benefit of your people, that allows you to find the right people. It allows you to keep the right people. And he said, Jason, when you've got the right people finding the right customer, he said, you know what happens? Your shareholder is very, very happy. He said, but companies that act first and foremost out of the interest of their shareholders do stupid things. They have layoffs. They slash product offerings. They shut down factories. He said, we've never done any of those things, and we will never do any of those things. So when you put together, number one, everybody sharing a purpose, I mean, shooting at the exact same target. When you add to that, letting go part of your DNA, and letting go is the hardest thing that anybody will ever done. Not that long ago, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we go to a Lutheran church in San Francisco, and we generally go to the 9 o'clock service. And generally, by the time we get out of church at 10 or 10:15, it's still foggy and chilly in San Francisco. Not long ago, we came out, and it was a beautiful, sunny, warm day. And I said, you know what we're going to do today? And everybody said, what? I said, we're going to Fisherman's Wharf. Oh, we don't want to go. I said, we're going to Fisherman's Wharf, and you're going to have a great time. And so we went down to Fisherman's Wharf and played tourist for a day, and it turned out to be a great day. And I saw the greatest T-shirt I've ever seen in my life. It was on a big guy. The guy had to go 340 pounds.
Jeep.
And yeah, a big guy. And so his T-shirt was like a beautiful moving billboard. I mean, it was terrific. And it proclaimed in big letters, change is great. And then beneath it said, you go first. And I'm told in the house all the time, you know, it's a good thing you lecture and talk about change because you sure as hell don't like it yourself. You know, all of us theoretically, philosophically, intellectually get our heads about change, but change comes knocking and we say, not today. I got too much other stuff going on. And so one, united in purpose. Number two, letting go part of your DNA. Mm-hmm. And number three, existing to grow. And then I'll just give you a quick peek at the fourth one that I would do is this. And this is the most exciting. This is what I get the greatest number of emails about. This is what earns standing ovations. This is what makes people cry in audiences. Where I talk about the fact that fast companies, great companies, the most innovative companies are all led by people who don't see themselves as leaders. They see themselves as stewards. And they understand they have 5 constituencies. They have the workers, they have the customers, they have the vendors and suppliers, they have the shareholders, and they have the planet. And they tacitly understand that their job as a steward or a servant leader is to improve everything for all 5 members of the constituency. And one of the things that I urge audience members to do, and I'll urge anybody watching this to do, because it'll tell you more about yourself than anything you could ever do. One day, I want you to look in a mirror, because I don't believe, unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath, I don't think you can look in a mirror and lie to yourself. I mean, I don't think you can do it. Look in the mirror and ask one question. Is my life going to be more about me, or is my life going to be more about others? And I believe the leaders of the fastest, most authentic, most innovative companies in the world have at some point in their life looked in the mirror, figuratively or literally, and decided that their life is going to be more about others than themselves. You put those four things together that I've shared with you, and guess what? You're unstoppable. You're legions ahead of any competitor. You're legions.
So that brings up the question to me then, is what do you find is the most problematic aspect of today? You have these companies that come into here in Iowa. We have Microsoft coming in and Apple coming in, and they're all asking for tax breaks and all these things. And you think if they're stewards, they would be willing to pay a lot of taxes to get better education, to get better roads, to get better situations. So what do you find?
It's a game I've looked at. I don't know that they are coming in and saying these are the things that we must have in order to come to Iowa. I think that it's governors of states who want to be able to proclaim that they increased employment in their states, who come up with all of these half-baked tax credits and abatement of taxes for 15 or 20 years. And I think that's the game that politicians play. So I wouldn't put that in the laps of a Microsoft or the laps of an Apple or the laps of General Motors. I have no problem with them taking advantage of something that they're being offered. I think it's just a political game of football that governors and state legislatures across the country play.
How does the ownership of radio, because you actually started out in radio.
I did.
How did that influence you as well?
How did that influence me? Well, I have to tell the story, I guess, because that's what I do. I tell stories. I was 13 years old growing up in northern Michigan, small little town. And I decided I wanted to be a disc jockey. And I walked into the local radio station, WJPD, and applied for a job, and they kicked me out of the station. Well, I had one problem. I'd already told all my friends I was going to get a job as a disc jockey. So I was in a tight squeeze. So I went home, put on my confirmation suit. I'd just been confirmed in the Lutheran church. I had one suit, put on my confirmation suit. I took a legal pad of paper and wrote across the top, the following businesses agree to spend $35 a week each to sponsor the Jason Jennings Teen Time Show. And I spent 2 weeks walking up and down the streets of Ishpeming, Michigan, Negaunee, Michigan, and Marquette, Michigan. And eventually about 30 businesses signed the list. That was about $1,000 a week, $4,000 a month, long time ago. And I walked back into the radio station. I said, here are all the people who want to sponsor the Jason Jennings Teen Time Show. He said, you're hired. It's $1.25 an hour as a disc jockey. We'll give you 4 hours on Saturday afternoons, and you get a 15% commission. And I said, what's a 15% commission? And he said, you're going to get 15% of that $4,000 a month. Well, I could do the math. That was $600 a month. I was 13 years old, a long time ago. And that's how I actually got into radio. So I spent a lot of time on the air, small markets, major markets. Eventually owned a number of radio stations. And owning radio stations had a profound impact on me, because at that point in time, radio stations were licensed to serve in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. That's all gone. I don't listen to much radio anymore because I'm studying Spanish and have been for a number of years. I listen to the Spanish radio station, which is the only place that has good pop music and local personalities. I'm not interested in some lard ass. I mean, sitting in Florida in a studio in his house, being broadcast in 250 markets across America and hearing the same thing. So I think radio is in very, very sad shape right now. But for me, what I gained from radio was serving in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. I think that's what I do with my books. And I guess the other thing that start in radio taught me is, you know, if it's going to happen, it's up to me. I mean, whether it was getting my first radio show, whether it was getting my first book contract, it's just all doing the hard yards. And it's understanding that sadly, most people give up, including people with a lot more talent give up because it's not easy. I had a very disturbing conversation yesterday in the gym. I went to the gym late afternoon yesterday, and it's a big gym, 5,000 members. So there's always, I don't know, 60, 70 guys in the locker room changing. And there was a young guy standing, and he said, "God, you're here every single day." And I said, "Yeah, for 30 years, I have been here 6 days a week." And he said, "How do you do it? And what's the discipline?" I said, "I have no discipline." I said, "I'm afraid if I stop coming, I'll never come back. So I come because of fear, not because I love going to the gym." And he said, "Well, your ethic is just so impressive." I said, "Well, what's your story?" And I pegged the guy in his mid-20s, handsome guy. And he said, "Well, I'm just getting back in the gym." And I said, "Why are you just getting back in the gym?" He said, "Well, I just kind of lost interest for a while." And I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I was a carpenter for a couple of years. I went back to college, and then I was an account executive for a high-tech startup in San Francisco. I did a couple of those. I got tired of that. Now I'm thinking about getting a real estate license, but I'm not really sure if I want to." And then he said something interesting. He said, "I used to beat myself up when I would fail at something." He said, "But I don't do that anymore." He said, "I just take it each day at a time." And I thought about that a lot last night. A lot. I don't want millennials to be like me. I don't want Generation Z to be like me. But I guess I would like people to get the message that if it's going to happen, it's up to them. I mean, it just, it doesn't automatically happen. Nobody hits you with a bolt of lightning and says you're a best-selling author. I mean, it doesn't work that way. But radio gave me some great lessons, but the biggest one was my love of serving the public, interest, convenience, and necessity.
So how does that fit into the idea of radical change? Because you have radical change sometimes on this this LinkedIn page of yours that talk about radical change.
How does what?
Radical change.
Yes, yes.
How does that fit into this idea that you're talking about right now? Does that have an influence upon you as well?
Of course. I mean, I get to sit in the front row and watch all of these incredible leaders and all of these incredible companies. And the subtitle of my book, The Reinventors, was How Great Companies Embrace Constant Radical Change. And I think it all fits very well together. In fact, the companies that are the fastest and embrace the most radical change are about the only ones who are attracting millennials and Generation Z right now because they have a purpose, they're committed to growth, and they're led by good stewards.
You talked a little earlier, too, about the companies maybe not being the problem as much as government. So what's your perspective on government and their leadership style right now?
I'm almost the wrong person to ask that question. I find myself probably more troubled, more dismayed, more disappointed than I have ever been. And I will never become a cynical person. I'm not going to allow that to happen to me. I just will not. So I believe that we'll work through these things. I hope we'll work through these things. But as of right now, I'm very disappointed. Nobody in government is interested in authentic leadership. It's all a big game, and it's a game that I don't play.
So what's your impression of authentic leadership, and how does that fit in also to the idea of being fast and eating the slow, and the idea also of hitting the ground running? How does authentic leadership play into that?
I remember I was doing my second book, Less is More, I was in the field doing the research and interviews for my book, Less is More. And I was at a bank with the two founders of the bank. And I had had a tough time gaining access to them. But eventually we gain access to people. It's very hard, but we do. And I was so excited after this wonderful several hour interview that I got into my car and I was driving and I thought, I need to see if I can reach Adrian Zackheim, my publisher, who by then had left HarperCollins, was at Penguin Putnam, where I've done all of my other books. And I said, Adrian, he said, how's the research going? And I said, I just finished a several hour interview, and let me tell you what's different about all of these companies. So you asked about authenticity. I said, the air is just fresher inside all of these companies. Companies are not filled with people climbing up a ladder with their nose stuck up the bum of the person in the rung ahead of them. There's no palace intrigue. There's no politics. There's no necessity for it. I mean, it's just like a breath of fresh air. I said the air inside these companies smells like after you've had a thunderstorm and the air is clearing, and that I don't know what the air is filled with, but it's that kind of a smell. Authentic leaders have looked in the mirror and they've said, my life is going to be more about others than myself. And I think all of us have a pretty good BS meter, whether we want to have one or not. And when I'm with one of these people, I mean, the BS meter, I mean, is just, it's staying where the needle's not moving. There's no BS on the part of these people. It is, for authentic leaders, it is a higher calling. It is.
So it goes back to the purpose that you were talking about at the beginning.
Listen, at the end of the day, it all goes back to purpose. It all goes back to servant leadership. It all goes back to growing because you want to improve the fortunes of all the members of the constituencies. It all goes back to culture. And that's a word we haven't talked about today, but the net impact of all of these things that we've discussed in our conversation are culture. And the only thing that gives any company of more than two people any value, it's not the product they sell or the service they sell or the price they sell it at, because guess what? Eventually, anybody can sell the same thing that you sell cheaper. They can probably sell it better. They can steal your people. They can copy your advertising. They can copy your marketing. But there's only one thing they can't take, and that's your culture. And that's why authentic leaders of great enterprises and fast enterprises spend a minimum of 50% of their time working on culture. They know it should be the biggest balance sheet item that they have.
So how does the culture of you're in 32 languages, so how does the culture of those 32 languages, those countries, does that impact the culture of the company, and how can a leader, in a society where people are a little bit more lackadaisical, or a society where things run a little slower, how can they develop a culture that maybe is more oriented toward this quick speed?
I guess I guess maybe I would have not a disagreement with your observation, but I view it a slightly different way. Having now been in 110 countries around the world, having worked in them, having spent time in them, speaking a bunch of languages, being immersed in a lot of cultures, I'm at a place where, name a country, pick a country, pick Nepal, pick China, pick Argentina, pick Brazil, pick Colombia, where I was last week, pick Switzerland, pick Italy, pick the Ukraine. My observation is that everybody is looking for the exact same thing. Everybody is looking for a better tomorrow than today. Yeah. And it goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What is the first thing we're looking for? We're looking for food, clothing, and shelter. Mm-hmm. But after food, clothing, and shelter, once we've taken care of those needs, what are we looking for? We're looking to be loved and to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Once we get that, what are we looking for? We're looking to achieve our full potential. And I believe that that just spans every culture in the world. Yes, I mean, I joke with my friends, Carlos Baradello, a wonderful man from Argentina, Dr. Carlos Baradello. I mean, he always shows up 10 minutes late for meetings. And I say, running an Argentinian time again, huh, Carlos? Running an Argentinian time. So on occasion, listen, I get sucked into the same stuff. I paint with broad brushes, but on a one-to-one basis, I think everybody in the world is looking for the same thing. I've never wanted anything more than a better tomorrow than today for my family. I'm sure that you've never wanted anything more than that either, and I believe that's true around the world. And so, regardless of the country, given the fact that everybody's looking for a better tomorrow than today, I think great business leaders who lead with purpose, with servant leadership, with steward, in whatever culture they are, they will attract the people who are looking for those things. I really believe that. So I think it comes down to, once you have food, clothing, and shelter, you're looking to be loved, you're looking to be part of something. And what greater to be part of a company that is doing well by doing good.
Well, I think we'll end on that note. We've gone way past the time of 10, 15 minutes. No problem. It's been fantastic. I've been so fascinated. I'm drawn right in. Magnificent. And it feeds into the purpose of this, in my opinion, the purpose of this this LinkedIn organization itself. And that is, we want to be the go-to place for anything on leadership that anybody would like to learn about. And
that's great.
That's the purpose behind us putting together this LinkedIn group called the Leader Campus. And so it fits right into what you're saying. If we can get interviews with you and with others, the other people as well. I just got done interviewing a NASA astronaut. I got done interviewing some other people that are CEOs. I mean, we're putting together a pretty big library, but we hopefully this I'm gonna move you up to the topper slot here, because this has been fascinating and it's been really, really good for me. Just
promise not to tell anybody that it took me 24 hours to figure out how to download Zoom. Please don't do that.
I think you just did, but that's it's between you and I.
Okay.
We'll just I'll cut that out.
All right. Leave it in.
Thanks so much, Jason. I appreciate it so much. Jason Jennings, ladies and gentlemen, I am just so honored by having you on and speaking with you, and I don't know what else to say, but big hug.
We'll do it again sometime.
Well, yes, please. I would like to do it again sometime.
Right, we will. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.